Good morning. How are we doing? So today, what we're going to do is start investigating the opening lines of the Odyssey, the opening lines of the poem. This is going to be broken down into three parts. We're going to start talking about the way in which those lines are a microcosm for the entire text. And not only do they foreshadow everything to come and already raise those questions about what's going to happen when Odysseus gets home, assuming he gets home, but also the way in which they encapsulate the core themes of the text. And it seems to be the fact that the author Homer has placed this paragraph at the beginning in this kind of condensed form is really a way of indicating to us very clearly, signaling to us with a kind of signpost, exactly what the key themes of this text are, and particularly the fact that they're connected with one another. Okay, so the opening lines of the poem. There are four main themes that come out of these opening lines. First is just the journey, and what we'll do at the beginning, we touched on it in class, is that there is a literal interpretation to be had of these opening lines, and then a figurative interpretation. Literal having to do with of the senses, of the body, things concretely in the world, and figurative, something more intangible and more metaphoric, and ultimately it seems something to do with not just a journey of the body through time and space, but a journey of the soul in a process of development, and we also might say development and regression. Because if you followed the story by now, you see that there are moments where Odysseus makes advances, and then he experiences setbacks. And those advances and setbacks, on one hand, are caused by the gods, they're caused by natural forces, but ultimately it seems that they're caused by his own advances in his development, and then setbacks, his lack of maturity in key instance, including the lack of maturity of his shipmates, his crew. Then we'll look at human nature. It seems to be that human nature sits at the heart of the meaning of this text. Human nature in general, but then also the specific nature of Odysseus and the hero specifically. Then there is the nature of the hero, right? And obviously the nature of the hero is just an extension of this concern with human nature. The hero being a very specific, but also special or exemplary type of human being. And then last one, again, unfolding out of this issue and primary concern with human nature, is what is often described as the Homeric encyclopedia. The way in which the text shows a kind of panoramic view of the entirety of the world, and therefore is intent on being not just a book, but the book depicting the world with an encyclopedic perspective. Encyclopedia being a thing that's designed to contain all of knowledge in its entirety, and how it all fits together. So to come back to the theme of mankind, the question then becomes, how does mankind, or how does the human being, or how does the hero fit in this entire cosmos of this world? Okay, so let's read it. Sing to me of the man, muse, the man of twists and turns, driven time and again off course, once he plundered the hallowed heights of Troy. Many cities of men he saw and learned their minds. Many pains he suffered, heartsick on the open sea, fighting to save his life and bring his comrades home. But he could not save them from disaster, hard as he strove, reckless of their own ways. The recklessness of their own ways destroyed them all. The blind fools, they devoured the cattle of the sun, and the sun god wiped from sight the day of their return. Launch out on his story, muse, daughter of Zeus. Start from where you will. Sing for our time too. So the first thing we see is a dichotomy between a journey of the body and a journey of the mind, or a journey of the body, journey of the soul, right? Odysseus and his men obviously traverse the world, and it's important, the significance of experience and having experiences, particularly the diversity of experiences they have. And they do this, they have all these experiences by traversing the sea, right? And it's as if they are exploring all of the known world and getting exposed to every facet of it, the most extreme. And of course, central to the issue of the journey is that they all begin at home and then they leave home and they're in foreign lands with different ways of being. Something we'll come back to. It's interesting that this is a topic of this opening passage. Many cities of men he saw and learned their minds. Why does that matter? Why is that passage even in there? How is that relevant to Odysseus getting home? In fact, it has nothing to do with Odysseus getting home, and it might explain why he hasn't come home sooner. What's the significance? Experience and exposure to ways of life and ways of being and cultures other than his own. They're different, by which he's able to better understand himself. Notice as part of the journey as well, many pains, and he suffered heartsick on the open sea. So we notice that it's also a journey of the soul. Odysseus is only, we might say, Odysseus is only going to be able to get home if he develops that degree of maturity to be able to find his way home. And that getting home isn't simply a matter of navigation, right? So the men are in their ship navigating across the seas, but what really needs to be navigated is something in his soul. Particularly, we notice that they're reckless, they're blind fools, they struggle to curb their desires or to curb their passions. They fail to be capable of restraining themselves, of self-restraint, in those key moments, those decisive moments that really call for self-control. And it's those moments where they lack self-control that end up resulting in them either being prevented from getting home temporarily, or in the case of his shipmates, they all lose their lives as a result of their recklessness. Okay. So this really draws off the handout dealing with the opening lines that I passed out. In the English translation, you have "Sing to me of the man," right? But in the original Greek, the first word of the text is man, right? There's many ways that opening line could have been written. There is no need for the word man to have necessarily been the first word of the text in order to communicate the exact same meaning, or roughly the same meaning. In fact, the primary position of the word man being the first word of the text seems to really indicate what the text is really about. The text is really not about a journey in a sense, or it's about a journey in the physical sense to the extent that it has something to do with our own human nature, our own curiosity for ways and places other than our own desire for entertainment, because our own world is all too familiar to us. The first word is man, right? And it turns out to be a very specific term for a certain type of male. But we might say that initially the word man simply invokes human beings and human nature. Specifically, the Greek word for human being, like species, species, is anthropos. It's where we get a word anthropology or philanthropy. It just means human being in terms of the biological animal. That's not the word that's used. Nonetheless, I think it's not unreasonable to see in this word invoking the human species at large. And when we look at the text, we see that all types of human beings are on display, engaged in all types of different conduct that reveal one and another different facet about either human experience or human nature. Now, in particular, the Greek word is andra, and it's a derivative of the word aner, which means manly man. He's not simply a male, but obviously the concept of male gets invoked. What is a male, right? Animals and human beings can be male, but animals cannot be a man. So it invokes sex and biology and the various drives of men, right, in their instinctual dispositions. And I think you see those clearly on display throughout the whole text. The animal element of human beings at large, but also of men in particular. This is a text an ancient text that clearly acknowledges what we would call gender roles, or I think more appropriately sex roles, in that this is understood as derived from biology rather than simply cultural construction, although we'll see that's important as well. So we've got mankind invoked, human nature. We've got the male and their particular nature invoked. And then we have this thing called an andra, a manly man. Well, a manly man is not just speaking of a generic human being. A manly man is not just speaking of a male in biology and their particular instincts. A manly man is invoking a cultural type, right? A being that has been cultivated by society to play a certain, you could say, stereotypical role within it. And I think we can understand what a manly man is perfectly well. If you think of Hollywood, I mean, this is, a great action film that's no different in many ways than action films made today. You think of Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sylvester Stallone or Jason Statham or Clint Eastwood, these macho, manly men who are tough and rugged and self-assertive. They listen to their own will and their own voice. They don't conform to other people's expectations and standards. They compel other people to meet their expectations, and they don't take no for an answer, right? So this is a particular virtue of the man, and in fact, it's a manly man evokes the concept of the hero, right? And what is one of the primary virtues of the hero? Well, it's courage. Now, if we look at the Greek word for courage, it's andria, which is derived from this word aner, meaning manly man. And it literally means manliness, right? It is the attitude of a manly man to be courageous or bold or brash. And of course, if that goes too far, a manly man that is too brash and too bold is reckless. And if we look at this opening passage here, we see how both Odysseus and his men act in various reckless ways to their own detriment, because they're unable to restrain their own, you could say, manly impulses at times. A manly man is not just any man. He is an excellent or virtuous human being, heroic, right? Virtuous, Greek word arete, we'll talk about this more. It simply means virtuous or excellent, right? And therefore this person, we've started out with the word man invoking this general category of human being, but we should also say that the strict meaning of this word is a very specific type of human being, and you might describe them as a true individual. In modern society, we talk everybody is an individual, everyone has their own outlook. But if we take that concept of the individual really seriously, it's the person who's actively distinguished themselves from the group through their capacities and through the demonstration of their capacities in life on the most challenging playing fields or stages, you could say. And Odysseus is certainly a true individual. And you get a sense of that not only from what he does, but how other characters respond to him. They clearly recognize his distinct status and show commensurate appreciation for it. So let's talk for a moment simply about how the Greeks understand what a human being is. Very simple. A human being is comprised of a body and a soul, right? And the body has its own makeup and constituency and desires as well, and the soul has its own makeup and desires. Soul. What is a soul? This is not a word we use in our common parlance. Aristotle famously says the human being is the rational animal because they have a rational soul. Their soul is capable of reasoning. Well, what the heck is a soul? Well, a soul is a thing that cannot exist without the body, but it is more than merely our body or physical existence. So this is important. The Greeks don't necessarily envision the soul as some kind of magical, immaterial thing that floats off after death and lives on. It's something that's rooted in the body. It's something that the powers of the body makes possible, but by the same token, it's something more than simply the body. And it seems to be the thing when we think about what or who another person is in their essence, we think about it in terms of their soul. If you wanted to know what someone was, when you know who someone was, you wouldn't just look at them. You would think about their psychology. And it's something important. The body is visible, but the soul is mysteriously invisible, yet palpably there when we think about it. Psyche is the Greek word for soul. It's where we get our word for psychology, which is just the science of the soul, the science of the mind. And we might say that the soul embodies the heart and the mind together as one in different components. The most basic meaning of the Greek word soul is it is applied to all animate beings. In Latin, the word for soul is anima. And that's where we get our word animated, like very dramatic, or animate, simply living. What is the thing that separates a living thing from a dead thing? Well, it's a soul. And what does a soul do? It makes the thing move. It makes the thing live. It makes the thing grow and develop. Right? So things with souls are animated. They're alive. They move. They live and breathe. They develop, grow, and mature. So it's important in understanding human beings' life. Our soul doesn't compel us just to move, doesn't compel us just to live, but it compels us to act, to grow and mature in certain ways that other animals do not. Aristotle, in trying to understand what the human nature really was, did it by trying to understand it in contradistinction to other types of living beings, i.e. beings that had souls. So he looked at the distinction between plants, animals, and humans, right? And this is from his Ethics. And Aristotle certainly had his own particular views on things, but in general, he was drawing on a wealth of knowledge that had been developed in Greek culture, Greek poetry, Greek thought, going back to even prior to Homer. So he says a plant soul is based on nutrition and growth. So what does a plant do? It eats and it grows, and it does not much else. He says the animal soul is defined by nutrition and growth. And then he says, but also sense perception. And he said that the animal has perceptions of pleasure and pain that the plant soul doesn't seem to have. So, if you were to hurt a dog, you would feel really bad because you'd be able to identify with the pain that it's experiencing. However, for example, if you cut a flower off out of the ground or cut a branch off a tree, you wouldn't be crying for the plant because you don't really recognize that it feels pain in any kind of conscious way. So what's the human soul? It's got all the three: nutrition, growth, sense perception, but also reason. And if the animal is guided by sense perception, human life at its highest form is guided by reason. And not only that, that if our life is guided by reason, it's guided by something internal to us. We are capable of regulating or self-regulating or self-governing our own lives. Which is to say, the plant is dependent on the sun and the soil for its growth. The animal experiences pretty much, you could say, hardwired responses to external stimuli in sense perception. It feels pleasure and it seeks out the pleasure. It feels pain and it desires to avoid the pain. Reason, or speech and reason, the Greek word logos, allows us to live by perceptions not simply of pleasure and pain, but of concepts of good and bad, good and evil, right and wrong, just and unjust, beneficial and harmful, right? And of course, there are many things that are bad for you that are very pleasurable, and many good things for you that turn out to be painful. Okay, so one of the fundamental things you see on display in the Odyssey is the tension between our reason and our passion, or the rational part of our soul and the non-rational part of our soul. Odysseus and his men struggle to self-restrain. They struggle to govern themselves, self-control. In book 13, they struggle to curb their desires, to control them, to restrain them, right? And as we'll see, the Greeks paint human life as a tension or almost a war between reason and the passions. It's not that they see anything in and of itself negative in the passions, the impulses, the emotions. In many ways they celebrate them, but ultimately the line that's often used is the passions are blind. The passions are blind. What is it? The passions, they want what they want. They're just impulses for food, for drink, for sex, for adventure, for curiosity. But it's reason that sees. It's reason that can determine whether the satisfaction of that desire is going to be good or bad for you. Your desire just wants what it wants, almost independent of the consequences in many cases. We'll also see the way in which the fact that we have competing sources of motivation actually makes us complex as human beings and pulls us in multiple directions at the same time. And this is one of the great conflicts and challenges being depicted about human life in general. We are therefore a variable being. And this is a great liberation from the other animals, but it's also a great problem because it raises the question of which voice in our head, you could say, should we follow? And the answer, of course, is not always clear. So as the Greeks typically understand the soul, there's a distinction between logos on the one hand, speech and reason, or rational thought, and the other part of you that's alogos. We might distinguish this is the head and the heart, right? So that's a simple way of seeing our soul in two components, a rational and a non-rational component. A more fine-grained analysis, you see reason as one aspect of the soul, and then the passionate part of the soul being broken down into two components, this thing called thumos and epithumia. And this is really important because these three parts of the soul, what they really are motivational sources. They're parts of the soul that cause us to act. And in each human being, particularly as we'll see in this text, and it's very clear, certain characters are more driven by their reason, certain characters are more driven by their spiritedness, and certain characters are more driven by their epithumia, or their appetite. Or, on another hand, in any given situation, a single character may be more wise and rational, they may be more spirited, or they may be driven more in any given moment by their appetites. Okay. So logos, the rational part of the soul. Each part of the soul is a motivational source that has a certain goal or desire that it seeks to attain at any given moment. And as the Greeks understand it, we have the capacity to reason, and it is the cause of why we desire knowledge, why we're curious, right? It is in a sense, it's a passion like the others, but it functions slightly differently. Human beings, because they can reason, have the desire to know and understand. They're curious. And certainly Odysseus is, you might even say, inflicted by his own desire to understand the world. Perhaps the best example is in Book 9 on the island of Polyphemus, when his men get a general sense of foreboding about the type of being that they think lives on this island, and they're encouraging their captain, aka Odysseus, say, "Sir, Captain, it's time to come now. We should get going." And he's, "No, I want to know what kind of being is here." And he gets drawn in to the cave, and of course, as a result of his curiosity, a couple of his men are brutally murdered by Polyphemus. Thumos, translated as spirit or spiritedness. Thumos is almost akin, or can be akin, to anger. It's a kind of assertiveness and aggressiveness that can be positive or negative. Like all these motivations can be either positive or negative. Anger. What is the source of anger? Right? I think the fundamental source of anger is when one's will is not recognized by other people or the world. You get irritated because the world hasn't capitulated to your wish or your demand, right? So spiritedness, anger, or assertiveness is connected with a desire for honor or recognition, either from the world or particularly from others. And the most spirited people, it's a kind of ambition, a desire to be recognized publicly, and very often for tremendous deeds and an extreme form of recognition. The most extreme form of recognition that the Greeks have is kleos. This is the thing Achilles was after. Great fame, to be remembered not just by people who saw your deed or your own generation, but to be remembered for all time. Thumos is really important. It's the source of pride in that it is a social passion. It's a passion that makes us concerned for the opinions of others about ourselves, what they think about us. Epithumia, the desire for appetite, bodily appetites, and it includes both needs and desires. So epithumia is a natural kind of Darwinian impulse in that you have needs of the body like food, drink, sex, sleep, not to be cold, and all those desires help keep you alive and allow you to persist. But of course they can be taken to an extreme and be things that are not only not necessary but actually harmful to you, right? And if epithumia specifically deals with bodily desires, bodily pleasures, right? And what's interesting is if we look at the suitors, these are men, for the Greeks, of a kind of low bearing, because their desires seem much more base. There's a hierarchy here with reason at the top and epithumia at the bottom. People who desire things of the body are lesser than men who seek honor and recognition, or who seek and have wisdom, right? And why is that? Think about it. Epithumia, bodies of the desires of the body, that's no different than any other animal. So to engage in these kinds of desires is to be little more than another type of animal. And of course, when you look at the suitors in the house of Odysseus, you see them, what's a good word for them? They're pigs at a trough, stuffing their face a lot of the time, drinking and eating. Okay, so we're going to see the fundamental tension between reason and the passions, but there's a more basic problem here. The more basic problem is that the human being is complex rather than simple. And not only are we complex, we're multifaceted. This multifaceted aspect of our identity is going to be a problem, and perhaps it is the problem and the conflict in the entire text. Odysseus is the human being who is polytropon, the andra polytropon. He is the man of many twists and turns. So this word polytropos or polytropon is translated as twists and turns. So if we take this on the literal level, he is a man whose entire journey has taken all types of deviations and twists and turns. He's gone through trials and tribulations, unexpected detours, right? In fact, if his journey was to go from Troy to Troy and back, his entire journey home consists of almost one detour after another, which is to say, it's a place that you hadn't intended on going, but you ended up nonetheless. But he's also a man of twists and turns. There's a lot of levels of this meaning, of this phrase. But one of them is he's cunning, he's sneaky, he's elusive. He appears one way, but is actually another. He's deceptive, he lies. This also illustrates something about human beings in terms of our capacity to use our reason to deceive, to present one image that is not the reality behind the image, because our self consists of an interior life that is invisible to others. So we are beings that are twists and turns to others, and also ourselves. We're opaque to ourselves. We are not clear in our own understanding of what we want, right? So let's just talk about this word, polytropos. Poly means many, right? Diverse, multiple. And tropos has a number of meanings. Turn, side, way of life. This word tropos is used as a way of life. It's a path through life, a trajectory, right? And when we think about this in the context of being out on the open sea, driven time and again off course, taking those detours, we see that on the most literal level, polytropos signifies the multi-directionness of this journey, that there is no straight line in this journey. And it is also true of human life. There is no straight line trajectory of human life. It is a constantly changing, evolving, and responding to our capacity to choose and our capacity to have alternatives because of our ability to reflect on our own life and be conscious of our own decisions. Therefore, the open sea is a tremendously significant metaphor. It is obviously important culturally for the Greeks because they are a seafaring people and they get exposed to worlds other than their own through the sea, through commerce, through war, through exploration. But the sea is also something that's amorphous. As I like to say, there's no 6-lane highway on the sea. There's no double yellow line on the sea. It's just an open, amorphous expanse, and one can go this way and one can go that. And I think the sea becomes a metaphor for a kind of directionlessness that is the problem of human life. Human life does not simply dictate a course of action or a path, a tropos through it, a certain way of life. This may be exactly why in the Old Testament, God just says, this is the life a human being should live, and end the discussion right there. Be obedient to me. Obedience to God is fear in the Lord. Faith is fear in the Lord. Don't question the path. Why not question the path? It's not, I don't think, because the ancient Hebrews, are trying to be excessively oppressive. I think they're incredibly sensitive to this very problem of the directionless of life that's captured in this open sea, right? And as we'll see, there are great metaphors in ancient Greece in which the ship could be the ship of state, right? It could be, the ship could be a metaphor for a community. And of course, Odysseus and his men are a community out on the sea. But the ship can also be a metaphor for a human being as they traverse the sea, as they traverse their own life, right? And there's a classic metaphor that appears in the Greeks and extends right into modern times of the rudder of the ship being reason. What does reason do? It's supposed to guide you through the ocean. It's supposed to navigate you through the ocean. Reason is supposed to guide you and be a rudder in terms of your decision making in life. And the gale forces acting on the ship are like the passions, the impulses that propel us forward towards certain objects, and then reason modifies that trajectory Okay, so polytropos, much turned, many turning, many-sided, multifaceted, variegated, complex, complicated, convoluted, a being of many ways, right? So if we look at all the Homeric encyclopedia of all the beings we see in this text, we see beings of many different ways. And even within a single person like Odysseus, or even within a single community like the Greeks, we see many instances where people act differently. Odysseus, in a sense, is capable of contradicting himself because he's capable of being multifaceted. Much turned, many turning. I mean, it almost gives the impression of Odysseus being washed up on a shore and rolled over, a ship rolled over in the ocean. Forces, our nature is, in a sense, a force sometimes beyond our own control. But also Odysseus is much turning. He's much developing. He's much changing, or simply revealing a different facet of himself from one scene to the next. He's variegated and he's complex. He represents different sides of himself before different characters. So here we have the passage from Plato's Laws, the one that I actually handed out at the beginning of the semester. And this perfectly captures the tension in our soul between reason and the passions and the problem it creates. And here Plato speaks of the kind of myth of the divine puppet, and we are the divine puppet, being our strings being pulled by the gods. But it seems, interestingly, that they don't seem to have an absolute control over our way of life, or our course of actions, our path through life. He says, let's think about these things in this way. Let's consider each of us living beings to be a divine puppet, put together either for their play, the gods, or for some serious purpose which we do not know. So this already introduces us to the mysteries of human nature. We don't know why we're here, and furthermore, we don't know where we came from exactly, and we don't know where we're going, right? What does this journey represent? It represents an exploration, right? But ultimately, we have a goal of the journey, but it's not entirely clear what that is. And the journey is not simply the return from Troy; it's life. Life is that journey. What we do know is that these passions work within us like tendons and cords, drawing us and pulling us against one another in opposite directions toward opposing deeds, struggling in the same region where virtue and vice lie separated from one another. So he describes the various parts of the soul, the three parts of the soul, as like tendons or cords pulling us in different directions toward different courses of action which are contradictory or opposing to one another. Those ends. What is the end of the journey? Right? And this spells out the main problem, that human beings have competing sources of motivation that are in conflict with one another. Now the argument asserts that each person should always follow one of the cords, never letting go of it and pulling with it against the others. This cord is the golden and sacred pool of calculation. He's talking about reason here. Calculation in this case is another word for reason. And is called the common law of the city. The other cords are hard and iron, while this one is soft, inasmuch as it is golden. The others resemble a multitude of different forms. It is necessary always to assist the most noble pull of the law, because calculation, while noble, is gentle rather than violent. He says it is necessary always to assist this noble pull of law, because calculation, reason, while noble, is gentle rather than violent, and its pull is in need of helpers if the race of gold is to be victorious for us over the other races. So he says some other interesting things. The golden thread of reason is flexible. And of course, the thread goes up to the gods, right? The gods are the puppets. We are the divine puppet. But the other threads, the thread of the passions, the string of the passions, are iron. They are unadjustable and unchangeable, right? They affect us beyond our control. But reason is the thing that can allow us to be you could say the makers of our own destiny, because it has a certain amount of flexibility. And I think the flexibility symbolizes two things. One, that we're not completely controlled by the gods or nature, and connected with that therefore our life can be the result of our own direction rather than being at the mercy of forces outside our control. Right? So there's two things to come away from this. One is the multiplicity of forces, the polytropic forces that pull in opposing directions. And number two, that reason can be the guide to direct our life if it can overcome the pull of the passions. In 18th century moral philosophy, they spoke a lot about the springs which motivate men to action, the psychic springs which motivate actions. And these springs were the same types of passions and reason that we're talking about in Homer. Very little has changed. So it raises the question of motivations. What's that movie? What do women want? That's the great mystery, right? Because of the multiplicity and the elusiveness of their mind sometimes. But we see some key motives, some goals, right, on display here. Notice what's mentioned. Plunder. Men desire to plunder. They want stuff, right? And I would say, on one hand, that could be connected with appetites of the body, but it could also be connected with spiritedness and desire for recognition, because when people plunder, they get wealth, and people want to be recognized. They don't want to just have money. They want to be recognized for their having money. They devour the cattle of the sun. Well, that's a direct reference to the appetitive desires of epithumia. They desire to, for example, get home, right? They seek a homecoming. And home, the place where you belong, the place where your identity is formed and exists. What else do they desire here? What else motivates them? Fighting to save their lives. Fighting to save their lives. What's more central to any animal's existence than their desire for survival? But there's one more that's really odd, I think. Many cities of men he saw and learned their minds. It shows that part of this text is about the rational desire for knowledge and understanding, and the curiosity that arises from our rational capacity to be exposed to new and unusual things that we're precisely not familiar with and that are foreign to us. They're far from home. They're outside our home. Our minds desire to leave their homes and to because we don't know exactly who we are. To be at home is to be content with what you have. And I think the natural disposition is for human beings to not be naturally content with what they have. They want to go beyond, which means they have to discover new things, which means they have to have a basic curiosity for it. So clearly the rational desire to know about the world is on display in this opening passage. And of course, Odysseus, we'll talk about this more, as a hero, is a man who's incredibly rational when he wants to be, or chooses to be, or has the opportunity to be. So now we can move to that simple conflict between reason and the passions. The twists and turns are that conflict. Why are we driven time and again off course? Because we're in conflict with ourselves. We're not in harmony with ourselves because that conflict is going on. Or we're driven off course precisely because we have succumbed to our passions. And what does that induce? It induces the pain, the many pains, and the suffering and the heartsick. The experience gained from this journey very often comes in the form of pain and suffering, and life is not spelled out in advance. It's a game of trial and error, precisely because we are not robotic, precisely because we have this multiplicity of motivations. So this raises their recklessness, again, their inability to curb their desire, and they are blind fools. They are blind in the way that the passions are blind. And as we'll see on the journey to the last leg of the journey home, before the men actually get killed because of their reckingness and being blind fools, we'll see that all the shipmates really are not sufficiently rational, which is exactly why they are not the captain of the ship like Odysseus is. That's why they're playing the second fiddle, because they are naturally more inclined to succumb to their impulses. And in fact, interestingly, when Odysseus is captain of the ship, he will have the captain of the ship really will be reason. He will be almost a manifestation of reason, regulating the impulses of his men. And this is just a classic theme of Greek literature, Greek art. Here we have a what's called a centauromachia, the battle between the centaurs and the Greeks. And here, a centaur is a half-man, half-horse figure that you see on the right. And on the left, you either see a man, it's often identified as Heracles, although nobody is 100% sure about that. But so there's two ways that this sculpture has been understood by art historians. And one is one of the great labors of Hercules against fighting a centaur in this war. Or some surmise that it's actually a depiction of the internal condition of the human soul, right? The man fighting the half-man, half-animal. Well, what is that? The man represents reason, and the half-animal represents the passions, right? The passions are the animal part of us. And reason is, you might say, that godlike thing that we are endowed with that distinguishes us. Godlike because it distinguishes us from the animals. So to conclude this discussion, we see that it's actually our internal psychology which is what directs us on our journey across that ocean, across that sea, and leads to the trials and tribulations, the twists and turns, the being on course or off course. You'd have to know what it meant to be on course to begin with. How do you know when you're off course that you're actually off course? You'd have to know where you're going. And the problem of our multiplicity is we don't know exactly where we're going. And it's why I raised this question of how much does Odysseus really want to get home? There are definitely moments in this journey where his goal is not to get home. Heraclitus says, a man's character is a character is a man's fate, right? Who you are determines your trajectory through your life. If fate is your ultimate destiny, the ultimate goal of your life, right? It's determined by your character, because who you are, character has to do with your conception of right and wrong, and how you act relative to right and wrong. How you understand right and wrong is going to shape your actions. You're going to do what you think is right and avoid what you think is wrong for you. And then that's going to mark out a path across the sea for you toward the destination, in a sense that you've really made for yourself. And along with that, the Greeks have a notion that, we say you are what you eat. You are what you desire. You are what you desire. So, for example, somebody who wants money in life, first and foremost, what do they spend their time doing? All their actions consist, or the dominant actions of their life consist of trying to make money. And who are you? Who are you other than what you actually do with yourself? It's your deeds. What you desire is a reflection of your nature, right? It just spells out the certain impulse that is the dominant impulse of your soul. Is it a rational desire? Is it a thumatic desire? Or is it an appetitive desire? And even if it's one of those three, there's still finer degree of specification over the specific nature of the object that you seek. What you desire shapes and guides your actions in the course of your life, and therefore determines your fate.